never saw. When I started balling, I was young. You gon' think about me when I'm gone. I need that money like the ring I never won. I want saucing on you. I'm swaggin', I'm swaggin' on you. I'm ballin', I've a song on you.
Alan Iverson was a created player placed here within the Matrix for distraction purposes and for your own entertainment. We did a video a few months back breaking down and covering the backstory of the character Alan Iverson and fully explaining his purpose in the grand scheme of this so-called world show that we call life. But in this video we'll delve deeper down the rabbit hole and explore the different roles that the character Alan Iverson has played, hidden riddles, and will also further reveal just how much you have been conned. Let's begin with Alan Iverson's name. When we analyze the last name Iverson, if you rearrange the name by taking the I and place the I in between the letters S and O, it spells version. Many different interpretations can be made from the word, but here are just two of my theories. The basketball player Alan Iverson, like his celebrity peers, are playing different versions of characters from the past, which is why the white rap character Post Malone appeared on the hip-hop scene to introduce his debut song White Iverson that took the entire world by storm. The song White Iverson garnered notoriety back in 2015, 4 years after Alan Iverson's retirement in 2011, which ironically, according to Wikipedia, was supposedly the same year the rapper Post Malone began rapping. And also, let's not forget the basketball player Alan Iverson was a rapper as well. He had an unreleased album titled Jewels. However, the project was never released. The both would receive backlash for their controversial rap careers. These two characters seem to really have a connection with the number 4. The number 4 is said to represent magic, which comes from the Aleister Crowley teachings. The first 2 letters in the last name Iverson is I-V, which in Roman numerals means 4. The name Post has 4 letters in it. When Alan Iverson exited the game back in 2011, Post Malone entered 2 plus 0 plus 1 plus 1 equals 4. Post Malone's stage name was said to be rumored to have come from the basketball player Karl Malone. Remember, they intentionally put these so-called rumors out for a reason, as it connects to a past, present, or future riddle. But Post Malone was supposedly named after Karl Malone, who spent his entire basketball career playing in the post. Post Malone's birthday is on July 4th, and Karl Malone's birthday is on July 24th. What's also weird is that the basketball player Charles Barkley, who's a close friend of Karl Malone, often pokes fun at Karl Malone for being a closeted redneck.
Since retiring, Malone has moved his family from the trendy environs of Newport Beach, California, to to a place near his hometown in Louisiana, where his idea of relaxation is clearing land with equipment from his own timber company.
Sort of back to his roots. It makes perfect sense. I never saw him in Newport Beach. Riding bikes on the Strand? That image just didn't work for me. Karl chopping down trees works for me.
When he gets out of the log truck, he's going to be wearing cowboy gear, cowboy hat, have a stubble beard, just out in the woods, and he's having a great time. He loves doing this.
That's why I said he was a redneck. That's why I said he was a redneck.
That's why I said he was a redneck.
That's typical Karl Malone.
Charles Barkley also played the power forward position, playing in the post as well. Ironically, Charles Barkley's nickname is Chalk, and what's funny is it's said that one of Alan Iverson's nicknames is Bubba Chalk. Another one of Alan Iverson's nicknames was said to be third degree. The highest degree in Freemasonry is the third. Master Mason, there is no higher level than the third, which is why Alan Iverson wore the jersey number 3 and won his very first regular season MVP in 2001, which 2 plus 0 plus 0 plus 1 equals 3. But back to Karl Malone. Karl Malone's nickname was said to have been the mailman, because he delivered in the post. Post also means after, such as the post-Karl Malone era. But the previous Malone was the Moses Malone era, who was also a former NBA player. The name Moses derives from the Bible. Moses is considered the most important prophet in Judaism, and one of the most important prophets in Christianity. It's said that God chose Moses specifically to lead the Israelites from captivity in Egypt and take them to salvation in the Promised Land. The superstar athletes are the so-called gods, false prophets acting out each biblical storyline from the Bible in basketball form, which is why Moses led the 76ers to the Promised Land. Promised Land is in NBA Finals. This carries on from one generation to the next, until the next so-called God takes the throne. But the story is being told in reverse, which is why Michael Jordan, who is also referred to as Black Jesus by many of his constituents, came after Moses. Moses won the championship back in 1983. The following year was the birth of Black Jesus' basketball career. Back in 1984, when he had been drafted to the NBA, Alan Iverson's favorite player was said to have been Michael Jordan. These characters are what you may call gods, but they are evil gods. We tried to think a deeper reason as to why they would give Karl Malone the nickname Mailman, and think deeper than the surface level of just a postal worker delivering mail. But here's another theory. A man is an adult male human. A man's genome usually inherits an X chromosome from the mother and a Y chromosome from the father. But my theory is that the sick elites have taken 2 Y chromosomes from the male and recreated these male characters to play different roles in different generations, which is why all these characters are all connected. Back to the character, Moses Malone, who is one of Alan Iverson's fathers. But Moses Malone was born in Petersburg, Virginia. Alan Iverson was born in Hampton, Virginia in 1974, a year before Alan Iverson was born. Moses Malone was drafted to an ABA team named the Utah Stars, and the basketball player Karl Malone was drafted to the Utah Jazz. Moses Malone was mostly known for his career with the Philadelphia 76ers, which is the same exact team Allen Iverson was drafted to. Moses Malone finished his career in 1995, which is the year the rapper Post Malone was born, and a year before the basketball player Allen Iverson was drafted. Moses Malone was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame back in 2001, the same exact year Allen Iverson won regular season MVP and advanced to the NBA Finals against the Los Angeles Lakers. However, Allen Iverson and the Sixers would lose 4-1. But back in 1983, Moses Malone won his NBA Finals MVP and won his one and only championship against the Los Angeles Lakers. The 76ers swept the Lakers 4-0. Moses Malone died in his sleep due to a heart disease back in 2015, which so happened to be the same exact year the rapper Post Malone released his smash hit single White Iverson that introduced him to the world. The following year in 2016, Allen Iverson would be inducted to the NBA Hall of Fame, but back to Karl Malone, after Post Malone was born in 1995, and Allen Iverson was drafted in 1996. The following year in 1997, Karl Malone won his very first regular season MVP award. Karl Malone would end his career with the Los Angeles Lakers in 2004 after losing to the Detroit Pistons. Ironically, Karl Malone played for the Lakers, which is the exact same team that Allen Iverson had lost to back in 2001. Neither Karl Malone, Charles Barkley nor Allen Iverson ever won an NBA championship. The world we live in, since Earth's creation we have a starting point, and the world will someday end. But everything is being done in reverse as this society moves forward. Allen Iverson's signature play was stepping over basketball player Tyronn Lue. Tyronn Lue, similar to white people, like Post Malone, have light skin. Tyronn Lue styled the cornrows during that time like Allen Iverson. Like the word version, Tyronn Lue was the lighter version of Allen Iverson. This is why it was highlighted how much of a remarkable job Tyronn Lue did playing airtight defense on the 76ers' best player Allen Iverson, battling himself like the film Gemini Man, Duality. But speaking of the name Lue, there was once a popular song back in the 1840s titled Skip to My Lou, written by a man named Carl August Sandburg. Carl like Karl Malone, and the name August, like Austin, which is the rapper Post Malone real name, but we'll explain the relevance later. But the song Skip to My Lou was a song about stealing a dance partner. Allen Iverson was famously known for the crossover, which is like a basketball dance move with a dance partner. But speaking of Skip to My Lou, there was also a popular, and one, street basketball player named Skip to My Lou, whose real name is Rafer Jamel Alston. Jamel like Jamal, which is Tyronn Lue's middle name. Rafer Alston was born July 24th, which so happens to be the same day the basketball player Karl Malone was born. But Rafer Alston supposedly became popular and garnered so much attention from the Urban and One League, he blew up overnight and magically signed to the NBA, but it was all manufactured by the elites, staged to coincide with a scripted Masonic storyline from the past. Rafer Alston is mostly known for his career in Houston with the Houston Rockets, which was also done to fit a storyline. The city Houston is located in the state of Texas, and there is also a city in the state Texas named Austin. And guess what the rapper Post Malone real name is? Austin. Austin Post Malone. The rapper Post Malone was said to have been born in New York, but would then move to the state Texas. The former basketball player Moses Malone also played in Texas for the Houston Rockets before he would join the Philadelphia 76ers. But speaking of Texas and the city Houston, there was an NBA player who shared the same first name as Alan Iverson. His name was Alan Houston, who played for the New York Knicks. Alan Houston was drafted by the Detroit Pistons, who Alan Iverson would eventually go on to play for in 2008. But before Alan Iverson would join the Detroit Pistons, he played for the Denver Nuggets alongside a basketball player by the name Carmelo Anthony, who famously wore the stylish cornrows like Alan Iverson. The name Carmelo ties into Alan Iverson's connection to Karl Malone. If you break apart the name Carmelo, it has the word car in it, like car, Arl, Malone. If you add the letter N and the letter E to Carmelo's name, like the end of the name Malone, which is Karl Malone's last name, and you pronounce it, it's Carmelone. Karl Malone, full name is Karl Anthony Malone, just like Carmelo Anthony, or like Karl Anthony Towns, who wears the jersey number 32, like Karl Malone wore as well. But just like there is Karl Anthony, there is Paul Anthony Pierce, and Paul Anthony George. The Allen Iverson riddle is tied to the name George, which is why he attended Georgetown University. While playing for the Denver Nuggets, his head coach name was George Karl. Like Karl Malone, George Karl was born in Pennsylvania, which is where Allen Iverson's basketball career was birthed at with the Philadelphia 76ers. And just like Allen Iverson in the following season would go on to play for the Detroit Pistons. The Detroit Pistons were who Carmelo Anthony was supposed to be drafted by in the 2003 NBA Draft. George Karl also played basketball as well, and was a point guard like Allen Iverson. He was drafted in 1973 by the New York Knicks, which is the same team that the NBA player Allen Wade Houston played for. Allen Houston shares the same middle name Wade as the NBA player Dwayne Wade, and Dwayne Wade often praises and credits Allen Iverson for inspiring him to play basketball, which is supposedly why Dwayne Wade chose to wear the jersey number 3. George Karl also had a son by the name of Kobe Karl, whose birthday is June 8th, one day after Allen Iverson's. Kobe Karl was born in 1983, which is the same year that Moses Malone and the 76ers won the NBA championship. But speaking of Kobe Karl shares the same name as the basketball player Kobe Bryant. Kobe Karl also joined the Los Angeles Lakers back in 2007, 3 years after Karl Malone played with the Lakers. Kobe Karl and Karl Malone both wore the jersey number 11. What's also weird is that Karl Malone was accused of sleeping with Kobe Bryant's wife. Kobe now coaches the 76ers. Carmelo Anthony finished his basketball career with the Los Angeles Lakers, like Karl Malone back in 2004. But speaking of 2004, as mentioned earlier, back in 2004, Karl Malone lost to the Detroit Pistons in the NBA Finals, which was the same team that Carmelo Anthony was supposed to get drafted by. And just like Post Malone's connection to the state Texas, and Moses Malone playing for the Houston Rockets, Carmelo also played for the Houston Rockets as well. But speaking of the state Houston, Karl Malone had a white co-star teammate on the Utah Jazz named John Stockton, whose full name was John Houston Stockton, who played the point guard position like Alan Iverson, and they often battled the Houston Rockets. As the Utah Jazz would often battle the Houston Rockets in the Western Conference Finals. They would advance to the NBA Finals, but never defeat the Michael Jordan-led Bulls. Ironically, Michael Jordan was said to be Alan Iverson's favorite player as a kid, and he idolized him. Alan Iverson had the famous crossover on Michael Jordan and his lighter version character of himself, Tyronn Lue. After leaving the Lakers and defeating Iverson, he would go on to play alongside Allen Iverson's idol Michael Jordan for the Washington Wizards, as Jordan would play his last game against Iverson. Karl Malone, after ending his basketball career back in 2004, would go on to become a coach. As stated before, the elites do everything in reverse while moving forward. Back in 2001, Allen Iverson would cross over Tyronn Lue, then step over him, which also symbolized destroying his old self and crossing over to the new beginning, which is why, when you reverse the numbers 0, 1, in the year 2001, you get 2010, which is the final year that Allen Iverson would play with the Philadelphia 76ers. And speaking of the number 10, Allen Iverson steps over Tyronn Lue, who wore the jersey number 10. Allen Iverson's very last NBA coach for the Philadelphia 76ers name was Eddie Jordan, who shared the same last name as Allen Iverson's favorite player in Michael Jordan. Eddie Jordan was also a former NBA player. Eddie Jordan won an NBA championship as a player for the Los Angeles Lakers back in 1982. Against the Philadelphia 76ers, the team Allen Iverson would eventually play for, and the very same team Moses Malone won a championship with the following season. And had became the Washington Wizards head coach the year after Michael Jordan would retire. After his last professional basketball game, back in 2010, Allen Iverson would then cross over and go play basketball overseas. Allen Iverson would officially retire in 2011. This would be the exact same year that Karl Malone would retire from coaching, but speaking of the year 2011, Karl Malone wore the jersey number 11 for the Los Angeles Lakers. 2011 was said to be the same year the rapper Post Malone began rapping. In 2015, he released his smash hit White Iverson. In 2016, Iverson would be inducted into the Hall of Fame. That same year, Post Malone released his new single Celebration. Post Malone, has since crossed over musically. However, as we travel even deeper down the rabbit hole, there are other NBA players who shared the same last name Iverson that seem to have a connection and be different versions of Iverson. For example, there was a player by the name Bob Iverson who once played for the Chicago Bulls, which so happened to be the same team that Michael Jordan, Allen Iverson's idol, was drafted to. Bob Iverson was drafted to the Bulls back in 1975, which was the same exact year Allen Iverson was born. He played college in North Texas and was born in Michigan, and just like Bob Iverson attended college in Michigan, Allen Iverson played for the Detroit Pistons, in which Detroit is located in Michigan. There was also another player by the name Chuck Iverson, and remember Allen Iverson's nickname is said to be Bubba Chuck. But here's where I think the elites pulled a fast one on us, and Allen Iverson is playing these same characters, wearing a mask disguised as a robot, alien or clone, which is why their names are Bob and Chuck. And if you put the names Bob and Chuck together and break it apart, it's Bob Chuck, but say it fast, it's Bubba Chuck. Also, how I think the elites mocked us is by Kobe Bryant, who often battled against Allen Iverson, and whose Kobe's father also once played for the 76ers like Allen Iverson, and Kobe's uncle Chubby Cox was drafted to the Chicago Bulls like Bob Iverson back in 1978, 3 years after Bob Iverson would be drafted. But Kobe stated that the NBA were fortunate that Allen Iverson didn't grow to be 6'5". This could be the elites clearly trolling us because Bob Iverson, who Allen Iverson once played the role of, was actually 6'6", and was the same height as Michael Jordan. Charles Barkley, better known as Chuck, also played for the Philadelphia 76ers as well. He was drafted the same year as Allen Iverson's idol Michael Jordan in 1984. But Chuck Iverson was drafted by the Seattle Supersonics in 1973, which is the same year that Allen Iverson's former head coach George Karl was drafted. George Karl also coached the Seattle Supersonics back in 1993. His team faced the Utah Jazz, with Karl Malone in the first round, faced Houston in the second round, and in the Western Conference Finals, faced Charles Chuck Barkley and the Phoenix Suns. But let's delve deeper into the words crossing over and the word version. In technology, when updating a software on your computer, you are crossing over to a newer, updated version. The human brain operates like a computer, which is why it's called programming. Our brains, the elites, will use new artificial intelligence to program the masses. Thus why we now have the metaverse. As things gradually become more advanced, we'll rely on artificial intelligence to handle all aspects of our daily lives, and will no longer need these manufactured characters / entertainers for influence, as they have served their purpose. Allen Iverson was given the name AI, which is really short for artificial intelligence. A repeated name that was like a constant reminder of what will be used in the future. These riddles have existed since the beginning of time, but used as misdirection. But now we are solving these riddles. Everything is fake.